Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AdCup Show. Imagine you are trying to build a partnership or a relationship and you are genuine about it. However, you know the opposite party is not genuine and it's not interested in building a mutually win win partnership. It only wants to gain leverage over you and use it for their own vested interests. Slowly, you start recognizing this reality which you initially ignored and start distancing yourself from the opposite party because you don't have any other option. But you also know that you have allowed the opposite party to build leverage over you. And now you're feeling entrapped. Your autonomy and sovereignty is being threatened. This is what India is feeling right now with regards to its relationship with the US. It's getting clear now that the US is trying to use India against China and for its other vested interests. The US is not interested in building long-term stable partnership with India. The US is entrapping India, which is resulting in the decline of India-America relationship. The US and India has been cozying up over the past 2 decades. Trade deals, defense pacts, tech collaboration, etc., etc. But now it looks like things are changing and they are changing fast. First, let's clarify what we mean by entrapment. In international relations, entrapment happens when a powerful country draws a less powerful into its orbit, getting them to commit to conflict or policies that mainly serve the stronger nation's interests. Think of it like being roped into someone else's fight when you would rather stay neutral. This is what happened with Ukraine and in the past with Pakistan. For India, a rising power with a proud history of strategic autonomy means it doesn't like picking sides. This is a big deal. So, is the US trying to pull India into its global strategy, especially against China and Russia? To answer that, we need to look at the history of this relationship. So India and the US weren't always on the same page. When India gained independence in 1947, it chose non-alignment, refusing to side either with the US or the Soviet Union during the Cold War. However, India tilted towards the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, the US was busy building alliances to contain communism and it cozied up with Pakistan, India's arch rival. That didn't sit well with New Delhi. One thing to note here is that the US wasn't genuine with Pakistan also. The US used Pakistan only for its vested interests. Today, Pakistan is in ruins. The country is in inevitable decline. Things got spicy between India and the US in 1971 during the Bangladesh Liberation War. India supported Bangladesh's independence from Pakistan, but the US sent the USS Enterprise, a massive aircraft carrier, to the Bay of Bengal to back Pakistan. It was a clear signal the US wasn't India's friend. Fast forward to 1998, India conducts nuclear tests and the US slapped sanction on it, and on the other hand, nothing happened to Pakistan when they did their nuclear test. So this was the story of the relationship between India and the US in the 20th century, and it wasn't really great. For decades, India and the US were like two people at a party who just didn't vibe. India leaned towards the Soviet Union for arms and support, while the US backed Pakistan and they did that against India. But then the world changed and so did this relationship. Cold War ended and the world entered in the 21st century. The big shift between India and the US came in the early 2000s. The Cold War was over and China was rising fast. The US started seeing India with its billion-plus population and growing economy as a potential partner to balance China's power in Asia. But obviously, it wasn't and it isn't a genuine partnership. In 2005, President George W. Bush and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh signed the US-India Civil Nuclear Agreement. This was huge because India was still under sanctions and the relationship was not really great. Civil nuclear deal gave India access to civilian nuclear technology, even though India hadn't signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT). Basically, the US was saying, "We trust you, India, let's be friends." But behind those words, the US had evil intentions. The intentions which seeked only leverage and one-sided benefits. The US trust costed India a lot. India was flooded with missionaries, NGOs, and civil societies. This was the way the US said to India that we'll remove sanctions and all the restrictions if you give the US access not just to your market but also to your institutions, society, and politics. Basically, the US wanted to manipulate India in every field. The US openly started interfering in India's internal affairs. Several reports were published about how India was not democratic enough and how freedom was eroding in India. This was all fake. However, India ignored all that and focused on building the relationship with the US. And guess what? The US was and is openly supporting Pakistan against India. All this has nothing to do with the 20th century Cold War. This was all in the era of partnership, which started somewhere from 2005. So it's probably more than 20 years now. Since civil nuclear deal, every US president, be it Obama, Trump, Biden, has only doubled down on this partnership, and they did this for their own one-sided vested interests. They started forcing India into things which India never wanted to do. Today, India-US partnership is called a comprehensive global and strategic partnership. It's about trade, defense, technology, and shared goal of keeping the Indo-Pacific region free and open. Let's further break this partnership into three big areas: strategy, economics, and defense. Let's start with strategy. And by the way, this is all before the beginning of Trump's second term. So it means whatever I'm talking is between 2005 to 2024. The US sees China as its biggest rival, economically and militarily. Enter the Quad, a group of four democracies: India, the US, Japan, and Australia. These four countries started working together to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. It means they wanted to counter China's moves like Belt and Road Initiative, which builds infrastructure across Asia to expand Chinese influence. But as of now, nothing has been started or accomplished on the Quad. India is a key player here. It shares a long disputed border with China. India is also wary of China's naval presence in the Indian Ocean. So joining Quad makes sense for India. It gets to flex its muscle with joint military exercises like Malabar and gain US support for its regional ambitions. However, the current situation isn't like that. Slowly, India realized that Quad is less about India's interests and more about US using India as a frontline state against China. India is seen as a pit stop for US military plans in Asia. This made India extremely cautious about US plans. US wants India to do its dirty work in the Indo-Pacific. India, though, has been careful. Back in 2016, it refused to join US-led naval patrols in the South China Sea. But in the same year, India also signed the Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement with the US. This agreement allows for reciprocal access of military facilities for supplies and repairs, facilitating joint exercises and humanitarian efforts. This was the point where things started changing fast. You see, this agreement wasn't seen in a good light by Russia and China. With Russia, India still was able to explain them, but with China, things were about to go out of control. Just within 1 year, in 2017, Doklam standoff happened between India and China. It was a military standoff which lasted for 73 days. Things started getting ugly between India and China while India continued building its partnership with the US. On May 5th, 2020, a deadly clash broke out between India and China, which resulted in several casualties on both sides. China has always hidden its casualties. This standoff lasted for a couple of years and still things aren't 100% resolved. If you analyze the bigger picture, then you'll find out that China wasn't happy with the US-India partnership. It perceived this partnership as anti-China, which it was in its real sense. Now remember, this was all before the start of Trump's second tenure. Fast forward to January 2025, when Trump officially started his second tenure. His plans and ideas were totally different. Many Indians thought that Trump's policies would benefit India, but that wasn't the case. He started putting tariffs on all the countries. Even penguins were not spared. However, Trump's tariff didn't give 100% desired results, hence, he started negotiating with countries for a trade deal, including China. Now, the situation is such that Trump wants to negotiate with China in every field with cold realism. India, which took the risk by signing agreements and then entering in a direct conflict with China, is not taken into consideration by Trump. In fact, it's not only with China that India is betrayed by the US, even against Pakistan. You see, recently India and Pakistan had a military conflict over a terror attack which happened in Pahalgam, Kashmir on April 22nd, 2025. Military conflict lasted for about 3 to 4 days where India had upper hand. Soon the US intervened and asked both India and Pakistan to de-escalate, and that was the point from where India-US relationship started witnessing a decline which continues to happen till date. The US clearly showed its tilt towards Pakistan. Pakistan was showered with billions of dollars in bailout and political support. So within 6 months of Trump administration, India was betrayed both against China and against Pakistan. India pivoted towards the US to counter China in the Indo-Pacific, with whom today the US is signing trade deals, and then the US is openly supporting Pakistan while antagonizing India. Trump is continuously giving media statements about how he stopped a nuclear war between India and Pakistan, which wasn't the case, at least according to India. And on top of this, Trump administration is wanting to sign a trade deal with India where they want India to open its all industries for the US. This is something which India can't do as it'll severely hurt India's economic interests. So now the situation is the US and China are signing trade deals and the US and Pakistan are increasing their relationship, which will obviously be against India in future. Now here's one question which everyone must ask. Is the US solely responsible for India's mess? I mean, India started pivoting towards the US after 2016 without building any capacity or capability. This means India did not increase its value in the value chain and blindly pivoted without any plans, despite knowing the real intentions of the US. Currently, the situation is such that India is entrapped and kind of isolated. However, India is now trying to rectify this mistake. This is all geopolitical in nature, but it's not like India didn't benefit at all from this partnership with the US. Economically, the US and India are tighter than ever. In 2022 to 2023, their bilateral trade hit $128 billion, making the US India's biggest trading partner. American companies like Apple and Foxconn are setting up shops in India, moving manufacturing away from China. That's thousands of jobs for India and a boost for its economy. Then there is technology. The US-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology, or ICET, is all about collaborating on things like semiconductors, AI, and quantum computing. However, here also, it's mostly about US gaining leverage over India. In 2023, they signed a deal to build a semiconductor supply chain together. Some critics argue this creates dependency. If India relies too much on the US tech and investment, it could lose some of its economic freedom. Imagine the US saying, hey, we give you all this tech, now support our stance on Russia. That's the entrapment angle, and on top of that, India's protectionist policies like Make in India have annoyed US companies who want easier access to India's markets. So there's tension even on economic front. Basically, the US doesn't want to support India's industrialization, something which it did to China in the past. India is taking US investments while trying to stay independent, but that's not how things work because, as I said earlier, India hasn't yet built its internal capacity and capability. Defense is where the US-India partnership has grown the fastest. In 2016, the US named India a major defense partner, unlocking access to advanced weapons and technology. Agreements like LIMUA and BECA let the two countries share logistics, intelligence, and satellite data. They are even co-leading the task force in the Arabian Sea in 2025 to secure shipping lanes. This is very important because the US wants India to integrate its defense and critical infrastructure with the MIC so that it can build leverage over India in medium to long term. However, as of now, this boosts India's military power, especially against China and Pakistan. But the US is already signing deals with China and funding Pakistan. This proves that US wants to expand its footprints in India just for its personal vested interests. This will have negative impact on India in long term. The more India relies on US weapons, the more leverage the US has. For example, India bought Russia's S-400 missile systems, and the US wasn't happy about it. They waived sanctions, but some say that comes with strings attached, like expecting India to side with the US in future conflicts. That means losing strategic autonomy, which India focuses on a lot. India is diversifying its weapon suppliers, buying from Russia, France, and others to keep its options open. India is also trying to manufacture at home, but that should have been done earlier before pivoting. Now let's talk about friction. I talked earlier in this video that the US has been vocal about India's democratic backsliding, especially under Prime Minister Modi. Some in India see this as a meddling, America trying to shape India's domestic policies. This is where the entrapment white gets strong. If the US uses its influence to push India on human rights or governance, it could feel like a loss of sovereignty. Then there is Russia. India refused to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine and keeps buying cheap Russian oil. The US isn't thrilled about it, however, it does tolerate this behavior of India for its long-term goals. This somewhat shows India is not afraid to push back, but the US could turn up the pressure, which some might call entrapment. India's strategic autonomy, its ability to make its own choices, is sacred to India, and the US wants to destroy it. On one hand, the partnership is delivering big time for India: tech, trade, defense, and a seat at the global table. The Quad boosts India's regional clout, and deals like ISET helps it compete with China. However, on the other hand, all this is not for free and will only hurt India in the future. I mean, the US did the same with Pakistan in the 20th century, and today the country is collapsing on all the fronts. The US has its own agenda, containing China, securing sea lanes, and maintaining global dominance. If India gets too cozy, it risks dependency on US tech and weapons, which could give America leverage to push its policies on India. The US is a manipulator that uses partnership to control allies. So what do you think? Is the US-India partnership a game changer for both countries, or is America trying to pull India into its orbit? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you don't miss our next video. This is Adcup Show signing off. Peace out.